everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Shaki and today we're going to be going through some of the disappointments and surprises I had in my reads in 2020. So this reading year, let me specify, let's not even go into the actual year. This reading year has been awful for me, I will be completely honest. I have only read 37 books, which I know sounds like a lot, like to some people who don't read excessively or anything like that. 37 books is probably a really good achievement and I do acknowledge that. And I'm privileged to have all these books, to have read them and all that good stuff. I am pretty grateful. But in comparison to other years, I haven't read nearly as much, considering I was in almost a year-long reading slump. From March until about October, I just didn't want to read anything, and I didn't read anything, not really. So it was really hard for me to pick out specific disappointments and specific surprises when I wasn't really sure of, you know, anything, and I didn't really realise I had read so little. Despite me not reading as much as I hoped or have in past years, I do have 4 surprises and 4 disappointments to give you in this video today. Some that blew my socks off and some that I thought would blow my socks off but end up not doing so. We'll start off with the disappointments because I want to end the video on a lull, so that's the best way to start, I guess. This is actually a book I don't own anymore, which is, this shows how much of a disappointment it was to me. I actually recently did a massive unhaul of loads of books I was no longer interested in because of my reading slump. I think I did that in about October, and that kind of gave me the revigoration to want to read. So I don't own this book anymore, but I still was disappointed in it, so I wanted to say something in the video, and that is All Rights Reserved by Gregory Scott Kalsulis. And I thought this was gonna be a 5-star read. This was definitely a 5-star prediction for me, and it just turned out not being that. It was okay, but it kind of just left me wanting more. So this is all about a world in which that you have to pay to speak, I believe. We follow Speth after her friend kills himself because of this world that is so constrictive in terms of copyright. However, when you're like small, the copyright doesn't apply. I think, I just can't remember anything about this book, I'm gonna be completely honest. And the main character, when she is finally given like the ability to speak and pay for her words and stuff like that, I think she vows to stay completely silent and goes mute or something like that, which I thought was going to be really interesting, and I thought the whole copyright thing would have been really intriguing, and it sort of was. I'm really interested about copyright and stuff like that because of just naturally the work that I do, and like it was okay, but the plot points kind of just went in places that I didn't really want it to, and I was just expecting a lot more and a lot different from the story. I also feel like the main character kind of just went through life using people. It's something I remember I was infuriated at, and it's never challenged either. She just is allowed to do whatever she wants. I did read this via audiobook, so maybe if I tried again, like renting it out from a library or a friend or something like that, so I could read the physical copy, it might be a bit different for me, but personally I didn't enjoy it and it was a massive disappointment for me. Next we have another book that I don't own anymore because it was in the massive unhaul of October, and that is No Big Deal. So No Big Deal, oh my god, okay. It is a big deal because it disappointed the fuck out of me. So No Big Deal is by Bethany Rutter, and we follow Emily, who is a plus size girl just trying to live her life. She's not really bothered about how people view her body or, you know, if people are interested in her, until she meets Joe, who becomes her like obsession, her crush of the day. And she suddenly, because of this guy, she's battling with her own body image and she wants to be like pretty for him kind of thing. I feel like this book was the most disappointing because of that, and because she wanted to change her body so much because of a boy. And I'm sure, because I DNF'd this book at page like 200, I'm sure the message at the end was don't change yourself for a boy, but I just kind of feel like it played into the cliche and the fetishization of fat girls getting skinny, and all for the sake of a boy, no thank you. I thought this was going to have good rep, and it kind of did. I like the representation of, you know, Emily being a plus size main character for once and not having the same sort of people and bodies and characters displayed in fiction. That's really good, a good step in the right direction. But I feel like the representation of her, like as a whole, the fact that she was there was a good thing, but like the execution of it probably could have been a little bit better. It felt like insatiable and like had so many tropes and so many cliches of like fat girl gets skinny for the guy, or like fat girl gets the fit guy, like how could she ever be with him kind of thing. I just didn't like the thoughts and the ideologies that the book played into. I also just felt like all the characters and all of the plot just lacked a B plot. So we had the A plot, but it was very like one-dimensional, not even two-dimensional, it was very one-dimensional, and it felt like Emily didn't really have much going for her other than the fact that she was struggling with her weight. And coming from someone that's quite sensitive around that area and has experience with eating disorders and body dysmorphia, and I love seeing fat rep and eating disorder rep and body image rep and like the recovery process in books, especially YA. This was just an example of that being really not well done, and there are loads of other books that do the same kind of storyline, and the fact that it has such a high rating on Goodreads just makes me feel a little bit sick. Finally, a book that I still own. This next disappointing read comes from Alice Oseman, and that is Loveless, which was actually released this year. So this basically follows our main cast of characters who find themselves going off to university. We specifically follow Georgia, who's very new to like the love game and stuff like that. She's never never really had a proper crush, or she doesn't think she has anyway, and she kind of maybe thinks that she's struggling or is different in some way. When she gets to university, she wants to change the things about herself, and her being not really like experienced in the love department despite actually really loving romance, and she tries to kind of like reinvent herself in terms of romantic experience. This book kind of like explores Georgia's perhaps like asexuality and other identities on the LGBT+ spectrum as well. First of all, I just want to say, despite this book being a little bit of a disappointment for me, it was still okay, and I think it is still necessary for like the representation. I still think it's valid if ace, arrow, ace people on the spectrum of asexuality relate to this book, because it is an experience, but it is not the experience of being ace. And I do believe that it's own voices, so props to Alice Oseman for speaking out about her own asexuality and writing a book about it, because that takes some balls, and I really commend her for that. However, I do think that there were some blinding issues and missed opportunities throughout the book that I feel like could have been like tied up and made it even stronger than it already is. I liked the characterization, however I do feel like they were so young, they were written so young, and to say they were supposed to be like 18+ years old, going to university, meeting new people, they were all written so young. I actually said in my Goodreads review that I was expecting us to have finally some like new adult fiction about growing adolescents, going to university, finding themselves, being who they are. It felt like we had a young adult novel disguised as a new adult novel, or rather the other way around. And I don't really know why Alice Oseman decided to like kind of shrink the book down and make it fit into the YA category by writing about these kind of like young characters and trying to like pander to that audience, when she could have just reached and gone for a new adult audience rather than the one that she's already used to. I just don't feel like this book really fits in with that, and I feel like it creates a lot of missed opportunities and conflicts in the way that the book is structured and the way it flows. Alice Oseman also points out the fact that there's a lot of lack of LGBTQ+ representation in books and stuff like that, and the character of, I think it's Georgia or it's either Pip, I can't remember who it is, they point out the fact that even in LGBTQ spaces there's not enough representation of people of colour who are also queer. The fact that Alice Oseman points this out in her book and then doesn't make the effort to include more people of colour who are queer in a queer story is telling, really, and it made it a massive disappointment of 2020. The only two, I think, queer characters of colour in this book are two of the main characters. We've got Sunil, who isn't really in the book that much, and also Pip. Now, Alice Oseman, although recognising that these people did not get the rep that they deserve in things like this, she decided that it was best for the only two characters of colour that are queer, that are main characters, to kind of act as like little mission fairies go around fixing a white character's mistakes. And I just feel like that doesn't sit right with me. And Alice Oseman acknowledges that this happens, and she still did it. While I do recognise Loveless's flaws, I do also appreciate its potential, and I think that is why I was so disappointed by it. I knew it had so much potential for people who are ace, for people who are queer, people of colour going to uni and all that other stuff. It just didn't match up to my expectations, I think, and I think that is the experience for a lot of people who are both ace and non-ace. I am so sorry if this hurt you in any way if you are on the ace spectrum, and I hope that you can maybe read other books with ace rep that do a better job, and also maybe if you are ace, recommend me some in the comments. I'd love to see some other ace rep that isn't Alice Oseman's own depiction of her own experience of being ace. And the fourth and final book that I have been disappointed with in 2020 is one that I also do own, and that is Beneath the Sugar Sky by Shauna Maguire. I feel like I've talked a lot about the Wayward Children series on my channel ever since I came back from my little break, but basically the Wayward Children series is a series of books that follow children who stumble across magical doors that lead to worlds that are like the Wizard of Oz, Alice in Wonderland for example. Although they don't resemble these worlds and there's like references, and specifically they aren't Wonderland, they aren't like named, they do resemble these worlds, and you get lost in the worlds with the characters. After these worlds kind of spit the children back out because they are children, they can't make a decision whether they want to stay or whether they come back to the real life, the doors in the world just spit them back out, and these children are left fumbling and they don't really know what's going on because they lived somewhere for so long and then had to come back to the real world where nothing really seems to make sense. That's where Eleanor and her Wayward Children school come in. It follows Eleanor and her trying to find the Wayward Children a place in society and possibly even find the doors so they can go back home. I really enjoy this series. I held it quite highly in my head because it helped me get out of my reading slump, and I do think that it is why I'm reading again, and I can't be more grateful to Shauna Maguire. Also, the writing in these books is fantastic, and I will say that the whole series as a whole definitely did not disappoint me in 2020. However, this book just didn't really make sense for me. I just feel like I don't enjoy whimsical worlds that are depicted in this book as much as maybe other people do, or I prefer the worlds that the other books do represent and have in them. I also noticed a couple of plot holes in this book. The whole premise of the doors being like really easy to find and really easy to make keys for in this book kind of went against what we were taught and what I learned in the first two books. In the first two books, it is established that the doors just kind of pop out of nowhere and you have to make a rash decision when you want to go through them there and then. But in this book, they kind of like jot through loads of different worlds, and it seems like it's easy to go between them, so it makes it pointless the fact that people are at home at the Wayward Children's School waiting for their doors to show up when they could just be making keys and manifesting them to come through. The story also didn't really make sense to me either, because we followed a story about resurrection and about stuff that didn't really make sense. A dead character's, daughter from the future comes back and they're on a mission to try and find what happened, and I just didn't gel with it. It didn't make sense, and I wasn't as engaged and enthralled as I was in the other books. Don't get me wrong, there are some redeemable qualities about this book and the series as a whole, although this one is not my favourite of the bunch and it did disappoint me in 2020. The series as a whole is probably one of my favourites now, and they do get better from this book onwards. I really liked Cora being the main character of this book, and the fact that they are in a whimsical land full of candy and food and stuff, and her body image issues are seamlessly, beautifully interwoven within the narrative, and it just seems to fit. It seems to work, and I really liked how Shauna Maguire did that. I love the writing in this, I love the structure, I love the story. It's just that this book let me down, and it's just the fact that it was not my favourite in the series, but the rest of them are great. Okay, now we have the negative ones out of the way. We're going to move on to some surprises in 2020, a bit more of a positive bunch. So again, I've got 4 books for this one. One of them is a poetry collection. I think the rest of them are full-length novels. Speaking of poetry collections, the first surprise of 2020 that I really enjoyed and didn't expect to was Shades of Lovers by Catherine Hancock. This came at a time in my life when I 100% needed it. I had just begun the process of mourning a breakup that I went through during lockdown, the first lockdown, and this came at a time where I needed it so much. The writing is absolutely beautiful. Catherine Hancock has a way of writing that just is so beautifully heartbreaking, and it contributes to a lot of reasons why I love poetry. I love to read it, I love to write it, and it inspired me so much. I can't really put into words how much it's meant to me, and I'm pretty sure I've dog-eared some of the pages because they were so good. It helped me a lot. It helped me in processing my emotions, thinking about my heartbreak and what it meant for me, and healing. Really, it's a book about healing and love and self-love, breakups. If you're going through any of that right now, I highly recommend Shades of Lovers because it is so good. The next book on my surprises list of 2020 is Let Me Hear a Rhyme by Tiffany D. Jackson. This was featured in my Dead by Daylight book tag. If you haven't seen that already, go ahead and watch it. It will be in the link in the description box below. This was recommended to me by Emma Books over on her channel, not specifically or anything, she just spoke about it a lot, and I found it because of her, and I really enjoyed it, surprisingly. So this is all about Steph, who is a upcoming rapper in Brooklyn in New York, and unfortunately he is murdered before he can gain any success in the music industry. So his sister and 2 of his best friends are listening to his music and are debating whether to release his music into the world and let everyone have it, or keep it a secret. On the side of that, they are also trying to find out who killed Steph and trying to get his murder justice. We follow these 3 main characters getting closer and closer every single chapter, and grieving Steph together and listening to his music and celebrating his life. I really enjoyed this, and part of the reason why was because of that murder mystery element. It added so much to the story that I didn't expect, and I was just enthralled and invested, and I wanted to know who killed Steph and to get him some justice. Again, it does deal with some quite dark and heavy topics, but it does so in like breaks of comedy, and it has some really heartwarming scenes between characters. The characters are well written and extremely believable. You fall head over heels in love with them, and the music references in this book are sublime. I was loving it every second of it. It's very enthralled in hip-hop culture, and if you like the aesthetic of hip-hop and New York, you will love this book. It is amazing and so easy to consume and fall in love with. Our next surprise of 2020 is Tales from the Shadowhunter Academy by Cassandra Clare, Sarah Rees Wellen, Maureen Johnson, and Robin Wasserman. So I have not mentioned a Shadowhunter book in this video yet, which is a damn shame. Truth be told, I have only read 2 Shadowhunter books this year, this and Chain of Evolve. I cannot really explain the plot of this because it is quite spoilery. It's a short story compilation about Shadowhunters. We're following loads of different ones, we're following from loads of different point of views, and so many worlds collide, and like the timeline really blurs in terms of this book, which I really like. Again, I won't tell you anything else about the story just because it is spoiler territory in spoiler city, but I will tell you that I did cry like a baby over my McDonald's breakfast when I finished this book in McDonald's, and I was just bawling, and I'm sure everyone thought I was cray. I do actually have some criticisms of this book, although I did like it and was surprised how much I liked it, and I think the reason why I was surprised I liked it so much is in spite of the things I'm about to say. I do feel like this book is written like fan fiction, and I loved the point of views that it offers, and I love the blurring of the timelines of the Shadowhunter world and the Shadowhunter timeline and stuff like that, but I just don't think the pop culture references in this book have any place in them. Unlike the book I will talk about next, which really, it has a place in them. And I also feel like not all magical stories have to have a magical school. It's just not needed. Although I did enjoy this, and I was surprised by how much I enjoyed that in spite of my criticisms. Anything Cassandra Clare writes or anything in the Shadowhunter Chronicles is automatically my favourite. And really, I shouldn't have been so surprised that I liked it, but I was, because I had some criticisms of it, but I still gave it a high rating because that ending broke me. And the last book of not only my surprise of 2020 but of this video is Infinity Sun by Adam Silvera. Now, me and Adam Silvera's writing style do not get on. I don't normally like the kinds of books that Adam Silvera writes. I fully understand that they are for queer people, and I am a queer person, but for some reason I just didn't gel well with his books and his writing style. Just something about it didn't sit right with me, which is why when I enjoyed Infinity Sun so much, I was so dang surprised. So Infinity Sun follows two brothers, Emil and Brighton, who have always adored superheroes in their city called Spellwalkers, who are a vigilante group who would really like to rid the world of spectres. Spectres are people who can steal other people's superpowers, which I found so enchanting and so different. While the Spellwalkers and other celestial beings in the world are born with their superpowers, spectres can take them and steal them. That's amazing. Brighton wishes he could join the fight against spectres and could join the people who have superpowers. He wants to be the chosen one, basically. But it turns out that his brother is the chosen one. This is a book all about brotherhood and brother loyalty, and kind of taking a step back so you can let your siblings shine. That is kind of the reason why I love this book so much. And again, I shouldn't have been so surprised that I did enjoy this book so much, is because anything that has like sibling relationships that are really well done and represented, I love them, because I just love seeing good sibling relationships in YA. In Shadowhunter Academy, the pop culture references didn't really